Reading this morning is A Credo for Support by Norman Kunk. I do not see my disability as a problem. Recognize that my disability is an attribute. Do not see my disability as a deficit. It is you who see me as deviant and helpless. Do not try to fix me because I am not broken. Support me. I can make my contribution to the community in my way. Do not see me as your client. I am your fellow citizen. See me as your neighbor. Remember, none of us can be self-sufficient. Do not try to modify my behavior. Be still and listen. What you define as inappropriate may be my attempt to communicate with you in the only way I can. Do not try to change me. You have no right. Help me learn what I want to know. Do not hide your uncertainty behind professional distance. Be a person who listens and does not take my struggle away from me by trying to make it all better. Do not use theories and strategies on me. Be with me. And when we struggle with each other, let that give rise to self-reflection. Do not try to control me. I have a right to my power as a person. What you call non-compliance or manipulation may actually be the only way I can exert control over my life. Do not teach me to be obedient, submissive, and polite. I need to feel entitled to say no if I am to protect myself. Do not be charitable to me. The last thing this world needs is another Jerry Lewis. Be my ally against those who exploit me for their own gratification. Do not try to be my friend. I deserve more than that. Get to know me, and we may become friends. Do not help me, even if it does make you feel good. Ask me if I need your help. Let me show you how to better assist me. Do not admire me. A desire to live a full life does not warrant adoration. Respect me, for respect presumes equity. Do not tell, correct, and lead. Listen, support, and follow. Do not work on me. Work with me. Blessed be. I am delighted for us to enjoy again some music from our choir, led by Molly Webster.
Thank you to Molly and the choir. That is bordering on magic, that you guys can make music together without actually being together and hit the theme for today so on the head. Thank you so much. I'd like to spend the rest of our time together today asking you to reflect on societal assumptions that most of us have been raised with about people with disabilities. We've been raised with them so that we take them for granted, but they're subconscious. We other people all the time, people who differ from the norm. These people may see differently, as we saw in our story. They may hear differently. They may move differently. They may process information differently or interact with the world differently as they manage their sensory integration differences. Despite whatever label or disability that someone has been saddled with, our culture has worked hard to develop systems to take care of people with disabilities because, I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're good people. We want to take care of others. But when we talk about building a beloved community, what is it that we can do to actually include people who are different instead of continuing to care for and by extension, actually segregate them? Before I go any further, I should tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I was trained as a music therapist and worked in various institutional settings for 15 years with people with various disabilities. For the past 17 years, I have worked for an agency called KFI that supports adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live their best lives. We do this without any type of group homes, day programs, or other segregated settings. Our philosophy is simple. It is that with the right type and amount of support, anyone can live a rich and meaningful life. And I do mean anyone. We support people from Millinocket to Portland, some of whom require an eyes-on level of care, and some who we only check in on a couple times a week. But if we weren't there, things probably wouldn't go so well. You are going to hear me today talking about the system in some negative ways, and I'm fully aware that we, KFI, are part of that system. I'm not advocating that we completely obliterate the system, but I do think we need to take a look and do some thinking about dismantling it and rebuilding it in a way that promotes connection and community instead of segregation and isolation, like taking down the wall and putting up the fence, right? To be clear, I'm not calling for a shutdown of all group homes or even day programs, although admittedly, I'm not a big fan. But instead, I'm advocating for a system that allows for families and people with disabilities to have real choices about what their life looks like, just like we all have choices about what our lives look like. Not a forced choice of which group home do you want to live in or which day program are you going to go to. Often the only choices given to families are segregated settings. I know plenty of people who've made an informed choice and live in a group home or attend a day program, but it was an informed choice based on their experiences and their preferences. So I'd like to tell you a story. I love telling stories. Ask anybody that knows me. I've got tons of them, and we have limited time. So I had a hard time making a choice. I could tell you a story about the woman who spent the first 47 years of her life surrounded by her mother's love and the community of her 7 siblings in her home, but never saw the light of day or got a breath of fresh air or even saw a single healthcare provider for 47 years after the day she came home from the hospital, because the system wanted to send her to the state institution for the feeble-minded, and her mother was not having that. So she kept her home, and that was the end of that, till 47 years later. But I don't have time to tell you that story. I could tell you the story about a man who spent the first 12 years of his life in a crib with a locked lid on it, taken out only once or twice a day for the most basic care because he was labeled too profoundly disabled to benefit from any treatment. Custodial care only was the treatment. You got to love this language that they were using in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and actually that one's not that old. And the family, not his family, But the family that was paid to care for this man in the crib with the locked lid on it, extra money because he was so difficult. Well, he was difficult because when he got out of the crib and he was a kid, he, got into stuff. What kid, does anybody here know a kid that doesn't get into stuff when they're out and about in the house? But since he was, custodial care, it was deemed okay by the state to just, put a lid on top of the crib and keep it locked. And we'll pay you extra money because you have to put up with that. No, I'm not going to tell you his story, but I am going to tell you a story about a woman who's grown up in a small town in Maine and is living an ordinary life. Nothing extraordinary like the crazy stuff I just told you. But her ability to live that ordinary life is extraordinary. And I can't emphasize that enough. When she was born in the mid-90s, it was immediately suggested that she be put into, well, first of all, she was just going to go home and die. So the prognosis was not good. And then when she didn't die right away, it was, well, we'll send her to this institution for sick and disabled children. We'll put her into institutional. She was just going to be offered hospital level of care, but the family persevered. The family wanted something different. The labels put on this woman and the assumptions and expectations were that she was never going to walk, never going to talk, never do anything, never live, never ingest food, never, never. But the family refused to accept that vision for their daughter. They had another vision. Now, the family, I have to say, was extremely fortunate because they had been exposed to different ideas. If they hadn't been exposed to these different ideas, I mean, most of us are at the mercy of the system around us, the medical system. When someone looks at you and tells you something about your daughter, when you're faced with all these things that you've never been faced with before, of course we believe them. But this family had been affiliated with KFI. And they, KFI, what I didn't tell you is that we started in the 60s, like every other agency. We had group homes, day programs, sheltered workshops, all the segregated typical services that really are still in existence today for most agencies. But in the 80s, they went through an agency transformation and dismantled all of the services that we had been providing and created something new. And we continue to do that today. And let me tell you, it's a daily struggle. It's not easy. And we don't always get it right. But anyway, this family was familiar with KFI and lived in that region. And so they knew that something different was possible. They had vision. They wanted to create a life for their daughter based on her own merits. And so they began fighting from that from the earliest days and planning for it. And I can't emphasize enough how much having a vision made the difference. So when she started school, they, the mom, advantages of a small town, had developed a relationship with the special ed director. So they had good lines of communication. And rather than that one meeting a year where you plot the course for the whole year and then the family's supposed to back out and just magically things happen. No, she developed a relationship and had ongoing communication. And the goals that they set out for her in elementary school were not like any goals I've seen for a special ed student. There was no ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, nothing like that. The goals for her in school were to feel wanted. Let that sink in for a minute. Shouldn't all our kids feel wanted and welcome and included in their classroom? That was a goal on her IEP. To encourage friendships, to be in the classroom with her peers, to not be segregated, to be in the regular classroom, to ride the bus. The system, of course, wanted to send special transportation to take her to school. And the family was like, well, we know she can't ride the bus on her own, but she certainly could ride the bus if somebody agreed to sit next to her. Let's look for that person. Could it be an aide? Could it be one of her friends that gets to know her? Let's not create extra special things when what we already have exists with just a little modification. Let's protect her dignity. We, as her family, want to be partners with you in her education. We know her really well. If you run into stumbling blocks and something's not working, let's figure it out together. And they tried tons of things that didn't work until they find something that did. So school began to move along reasonably well. Again, a daily struggle, a lot of work. I make this sound super easy. It wasn't. As kids get older, they start engaging in lots of different activities like Girl Scouts. And well, it was going to be hard for her to go to Girl Scouts. Again, she's not using words to communicate. So she's not going to go there and say, hey, I want to work on this badge or that badge, or I want to do this activity. doesn't mean she wasn't interested, didn't mean she wouldn't benefit from being there, didn't mean she didn't enjoy learning about all these things that all her friends were learning about. So she was present, and what could she contribute so that she was a welcome member of that group? She loved being in the kitchen and creating food with her mom, or helping her mom create food that she could bring snacks for her friends. And so she was welcomed and valued for her contributions to that group. Her friends started becoming athletes and engaging in sports, as a lot of young people do. Her medical conditions, her physical disabilities, her lots of stuff, she's not going to be an athlete, just not gonna. But it didn't mean she couldn't be on the sidelines, sitting with the coaches, on the field with her friends, that normal transition from the school day to the what are we doing after school, cheering them on, giving them that cold water when they come off the field all hot and thirsty. That reciprocity of I'm doing for you, and now, hey, when I'm riding the bus to school, you're my buddy sitting next to me on the bus, was naturally developed over time. She was known by the people that she grew up with, and they knew her and cared for her, which is really important, because one day in high school, and then she gets to high school, and things were a little different in high school because the school was a little more rigid about their segregation of people with learning differences. And so she spent part of her day in a special ed room and part of her days with the people she'd been going to school with for 12, 13, 14 years. So one day she was in her special ed room, and one of her friends was walking down the hall and decided to just pop her head in the door to say hi, as teenagers will do. And she popped her head in to just say, "Hey, Court, how you doing?" And what she saw was Courtney in a chair being pushed up against the wall, or the chair was being pushed against the wall, and the aide was yelling at her for who knows what. But it wasn't okay. And this student, to her great credit, this is before all students had cell phones on them all day long, went down to the office, didn't report to the principal, didn't report to the special ed director, didn't report to that teacher or anything, made up an excuse to use the phone in the office, and called Courtney's mom. Told her what happened. Courtney's mom worked for KFI at the time, was a mile down the road, got up, drove down to the school, did a pop-in. "Hey, what's going on? Let's have a conversation about what's going on and how we're talking to Courtney." Because that's not how we talk to people that we respect, that are welcome, that belong in this classroom. When we talk about people with disabilities and the systems we've built to keep them safe, I cannot emphasize enough that the number one thing that will keep people safe is relationships, is community. It was Courtney's friend and her community that kept her safe in that environment, not the special ed system. High school ended on a high note, with the community really rallying around Courtney, seeing her through prom, seeing her through graduation. The way the system was, she would not have gone to prom, and the special ed sort of had their own segregated little graduation where they sat in the back, and after it was over, then they were all up on the stage as a group or whatever. And Courtney's friends were like, no. How come she can't sit with us during the graduation? We've been in school together since kindergarten. What is this about? And they figured it out. Some simple changes, some simple accommodations made by people who know her and cared for her, made it all possible. So what happens after high school for most kids? Well, you either go to college or you go get a job. And most students at one point or another, or most kids, move out of their family's house. Well, Courtney wasn't going to go to college. And we were talking about job development for her, but there are a lot of barriers to job development for Courtney. The first thing that happened for her when she graduated was, because, again, her family, extremely fortunate to have access to information about what was possible, which I just have to say, most families don't even have access to this information. Had been setting aside her disability income for a long time. So she had some savings, and she put a down payment on a house. And at the age of 22 or 23, became a homeowner, moved out of her family's house. And now it's KFI's job to send staff in 24/7 to provide the support, which is significant, that she needs to live in her own home. But she lives in her own home where she knows her neighbors, her family is around, her friends are around. Her friends, actually, most of them have left the area because there's so few work opportunities for young people in Millinocket. and or have gone away to school, when they come back to visit family and friends, where are they hanging out? You bet it's Courtney's house, not hanging out in their parents' living room, right? So that works really well. So she's got her place in the community. The job took a little longer, but we engaged in this process that was sometimes referred to as discovery, where we really do a deep dive into what people are really good at. We talk about gifts, skills, and talents. Somebody mentioned that in the chat earlier today. Well, one of Courtney's talents or gifts is putting things in things. Literally, that's simple. If you have a box of something with a bunch of things in it and you have an empty box over here and you want to put those things in those things, Courtney's your woman, man. That's her favorite thing. She loves that. Well, how would that translate into work? Long story short, she, with the support of her team around her and her family, runs seer vending. She owns 3 high-end vending machines, and it is her role to go out in the community where there previously was not access to healthy snacks. She brings the equipment with her, the supplies with her, and fills those machines. And the favorite part, of course, is emptying the money box. But now it's so digital, so that's not fun anymore. So her life now, she lives in the town she grew up, where she's surrounded by neighbors, family, and friends that she knows. She has a role in the community that's respected and valued, where she works and contributes. She is a member of her local church. It's probably where she is right now. She has a regular life. When she's not working or going to church, she's maybe relaxing, watching a movie at home, helping out around the house, helping out as food's being prepared, her favorite thing. She loves to bake cupcakes and donate to bake sales and drives and all that stuff. Contributes to her local community. She's a taxpayer. She's a homeowner. It's a pretty regular life. But given the barriers that were put upon her and the things that she has to deal with on a day-to-day basis, the fact that she's leading that ordinary life is extraordinary. And I hope that you have heard in Courtney's story, this brief part of her story, that the system that was put in place to help Courtney didn't get it right. If we had let the system drive the bus, as it were, she would be segregated, institutionalized, probably medicated, maybe restrained, who knows. I don't know if she'd still be around. But the people who got to know her in her community, they got it right. Her community got it right and continues to get it right. And as a result, they have all learned firsthand that we all need help with things in life. Some people need a lot more help than others, clearly, but we all need help sometimes. And part of being a community is being there to help each other. To be a welcoming community is great, but it's not enough. We need to look around and be leery and question the systems all around us that keep us apart, that keep people safe, that segregate, judge, and devalue. As the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once said, our goal is to create a beloved community. And this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. May we all go out into the world with open hearts and open minds and helping hands, willing to face down the systemic oppression that stands between us and the vision of beloved community. Let us all build a new way. And with that, will you join me in singing on mute, Building a New Way?